All right, welcome everyone to the Portland Utility Board's first meeting of March. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcasts of this meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and the public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of our agenda, and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. So PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we do stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people that have been made vulnerable by systemic inequities. And this means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And how do we foster that community? We speak up and we speak out. Each of us is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we will focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, not the person.
Hi, my name's Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, who you are addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by me, so please limit chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public testimony, asking for technical assistance, or letting us know if you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. I may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking. If desired, it's not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting, and it's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. Pass it back to you for the agenda.
All right, so today's agenda is mainly going to be budget discussions to see what our values and critiques are of the budget, as well as to decide if we need to be at the rate hearing tomorrow. And then we'll have we're going to start the conversation today with a brief update about the Natural Resources Services Area project team. I think we're in need of at least one more volunteer if available. And there's also an ARC meeting volunteer that's needed for April. So let's get started. Are there any disclosures of communications from the board members? All right, I'm not seeing any raised hands. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, so this is the public comment portion. Amy, has anyone submitted written public comment before the meeting?
Yes, I did receive some written comment before the meeting, and so I forwarded that to PUB members, and I'll just highlight a few key pieces from the message. It's from Moira Painter, who attended the meeting last month on the 15th, and they shared some comments saying that they chose the board to attend for a number of reasons. It was related to a community leadership class at Portland State, but they flagged the Portland Utility Board because of the ease of accessibility. They found the information and how to connect to the board easy to find on the website, and instructions on how to join. They appreciated the statements and acknowledgments of institutional and structural racism and inequities that the board makes, and the nature of the work because they're an environmental studies major. They also just shared some appreciation for some of what they heard during the meeting, some of the conversation that took place, and encouraged the continued use of the power of questioning and focusing on possibilities over problem solving, shared some appreciation for some of what Lorraine shared during the meeting. So if you want more detail, I will include it in the minutes, and you also received it by email. So that was the public comment that I received. If anybody else is in the room and wish to share public comment, please raise your hand or unmute and begin speaking.
All right, I'm not seeing any hand raises. So we will move to the approval of the February 6th and February 15th pub meeting notes. Take a minute to look over them and also raise your hand if you think we need to edit them at all. All right, not seeing any hand raises. Let's move to approve the February 6th and 15th meeting notes. All right, so just brief updates before we get into the meat of the budget. We're focusing on that natural resources service delivery project team. Looks like Bob has successfully signed up and has availability, but we are seeking another community member specific for this team who has a little bit of extra time each month to throw their weight into navigating the project team. So it looks like we've got a March 22nd meeting coming up. If no one else volunteers, I can try to see if I'll be available. But I don't know if I can long-term offer my assistance in that meeting. And so is anyone here have availability in their schedule as well as the bandwidth in their life to assist on the project volunteer team? Raise your hand if you do.
By the way, I think it's going to be 3 meetings.
Thank you for that. Not, oh, go ahead, Julia.
Julia, I was in transition and I missed a lot of what you said. I'm in my house now. I was driving and the transition made it so I missed what you said. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking for. And my schedule is a little bit up in the air, but like it will be less busy after session ends. But like I would like to tentatively say I'm interested, and I need to kind of have a little bit more information.
Julia, this is Amy. So the one piece, and it is on the screen as well, if you have access to that, March 22nd at 9:30 a.m. is the first meeting that they have scheduled. So they will schedule additional meetings, but are trying to schedule those around the availability of the volunteers who are participating. So if you're available on March 22nd at 9:30 a.m., it would be great to have you participate, and then they could send you the survey when they're getting ready to schedule for the additional meetings as well.
And in terms of what would you anticipate for prep time prior to that meeting?
Bob might have a better guess. It kind of depends on maybe your exposure to the natural resources stuff. I imagine they'll be providing some materials in advance of the meeting for the discussion. So I think they had estimated initially probably about a total of 4 to 6 hours a month for these meetings and the prep time in between. So I would assume maybe an hour or two of material review in order to prepare for the meeting. The meetings are, this first one is 2 hours long.
I would just add to that. I think that's right. I
Man,
think-
I'm just really struggling.
I was just going to add, Julia, that
No, go ahead, Bob.
you know, I mean, I think there's a good risk of this being kind of a dog and pony show. So I think these committees are always what folks make of them, and sometimes I think it's the in between time that actually gets more done too. So I think just something to bear in mind. The process is moving fast. So I think it's going to take more than what they put down to actually have an impact, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna, it's just really hard for me to tell what my workload is going to be like right now to be able to make this commitment. Like, I don't think I can do it. I'm like, I would like to consider it, but it's just like, if I say yes, I'm worried I'm not gonna actually have the time to do it well. I think I will sit it out. Sorry to be such a, like, I wanted to consider it and I need to have those questions answered, but I think maybe it's better that I sit this one out.
Totally understandable. Well, board, like we said, we are trying to get a second person. Please check your schedules and your bandwidth for March to see if you have the capacity to offer some extra hours into this project. And make sure to shoot Amy an email. And it looks like Karen has their hand raised. Go ahead, Karen.
Hi, Robin. Karen Williams, voting member. So I could be available Friday morning, March 22nd, for a couple of hours for the meeting. So so there's that. And what is, let me put this question to Bob, if I may, through the chair. How do you, so could we tag team, I guess is the question. Could we, if we had, there's sort of three of us, Robin, Julia, quite tentatively, and I'm hearing no, Julia, so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, and me with a real interest in wanting to contribute to this, but trepidation about overcommitting and underperforming. So Bob, how effective do you think it would be to say have two or three of us and maybe we each attend one of the meetings? I don't know. Is that feasible? Do you think that would be helpful? Maybe that's a better question.
I'm not sure I have an answer to that question because I don't know enough about the process yet. I don't know much more than what you've been told at this point as well. What I would say is this, my take is yes. I think it's better to have more people in there than less, so that more than one person is hearing and reporting back on meetings and weighing in. The Parks Board and the Forestry Commission each have two. We would just have one. So I think just that extra person there adds value for those reasons alone. I'll bring continuity to it. I'll definitely attend all of them. And I think continuity is better than lack of it. But I think having just one person in there is worse than having somebody rotating through.
Mhm.
So, so the answer is yes. I think that would be helpful.
And then I was going to just say my question for Amy then is what's your sense, Amy, if that would be acceptable, I guess, to the bureaus who've, they very specifically ask for community members, not ex officios. And do you think, having, say 3 or 4 people kind of signed up, but just having 2 at a time in the meetings would be acceptable, or is that sort of, I don't know, just playing a little too fast and loose with rules?
I can share with Shayna the multiple reps. I would agree with Bob that having two people present is ideal, just for the peer support and for different perspective as well. And even for just looping back with the board on what took place if one of those members isn't at the meeting. So I think that could be helpful. So I will tentatively take all three of your names down, and unless Julia, you want to rescind, but and have them connect with you all. I apologize. I was just trying to see a message because I don't believe that Dawn is in the room, and Shayna had an appointment and wasn't able to attend the meeting, and so was just messaging about the upcoming meetings, and also mentioned kind of a coordinating meeting that's happening on March 12th with some of the key reps, and then the full meeting on the 22nd. So there's also a potential briefer meeting next week just to prepare for the meeting on the 22nd as well. Julia, go ahead.
I'll just say that as long as Bob doesn't mind being kind of a conduit and like briefing me on things that I've missed, if I'm not able to make it to a meeting, I'm willing to be like a third. I like how Karen introduced that. I like that Bob is kind of bottom lining, but we're kind of tag teaming, and I'm comfortable with ad hoc check-ins and attending the meetings that I can make it to. I feel a lot more comfortable with that level of commitment. Next week I am going to largely be on vacation, and I'm trying to really honor that after getting through sessions. So I will probably miss that prep meeting. But again, if Bob doesn't mind doing a little bit of hand holding, I'm comfortable with being that third person.
Sure.
And then Bob, did you want to speak further on that? Is your hand raised for that?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to help folks out and try and keep folks engaged if that's useful. The only thing I was going to add is we did have an ex officio offer to be on the committee, and the rules were such that she was not able to. I guess I would just convey back that I think that's unfortunate. I think that I wish the bureaus were a little more accommodating of the pub and whoever it nominates, as opposed to restricting who were from within the pub, whether they're voting or ex officio. I just think that was an unnecessary restriction for somebody that did have the time to do it, has been in all these meetings recently, and I think would have added a good voice. And I think the bureaus could have been, I think, more respectful around that issue and more accommodating.
And thank you for all of that. Yes, and I just want to say that I think with our limited number currently, I agree with what Bob is saying, and also just with the limited number of pub members currently, it seems like the only way that we'll be able to successfully navigate this project team is to kind of hold hands, have at least two people in the room at the time, and then come back together. So yes, Amy, I guess you'll be sending out. Would you be sending out like availability requests to the people who have said that they're interested?
Yeah, you'll get something from Shayna. So I'll share your contact information with Shayna, and then you will be receiving some, I don't know what it's through, Doodle Poll or SurveyMonkey or what, but some means to gauge availability for the future meetings as well. Yeah, and I'll share that feedback with them as well.
All right, well, thank you all. And let's, next slide then. All right, here we are, meat and potatoes of the meeting today. We have been sent the requested budgets from the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Water Bureau, also including PBOT. And we do have a rate hearing regarding the rates and the budget tomorrow, March 6th at 3:30. And so we just kind of want to navigate our questions of what we've read so far, kind of any inquiries or worries that we have, of course, and then we'll want to figure out if it's appropriate for us to speak at the right hearing, submit written response, or if it's best for us to just make commentary the next time we have an option. And so with that, there we go. Thank you. So yeah, Amy did successfully share the requested budgets with us. Thank you, Amy, for showing us where in the budgets to read. It took me a minute to, I was trying to do it myself and I'm like, wait, Amy already wrote this down. So I hope that everyone was able to at least skim through it. I did on the back end of things try to give people who had a little bit less time to deep dive into the whole budget, have some people specifically look at BES and have some people look at the Water Bureau in a hopes of kind of digging in as much as we could in the short time that we have. And so if you like, we can start from the top, kind of focusing on, I believe BES was the first one in the budget. We could start there, or we could just have a show of hands, just anyone that wants to talk, raise your hand.
And when appropriate, I did get a few questions from a member prior to the meeting and got some preliminary information back, just some clarification questions. So I can share that on behalf of BES. Farshad is not here yet. I think Ken is in the room, so Ken may be able to answer questions as well. So I can either start with that or I can add that in wherever it's appropriate, just about FTE questions and a couple performance measure questions that were raised.
Let's start with that, Amy. Give us something to start with.
Ken, do you want me to just walk through them or do you want to speak to them? So the first question was asking for some clarification about for BES where the 11 new positions were. Because of the way it was summarized in the document, it was a little difficult to tell. It had noted that the priority areas were impacted, and so they wanted to just know where those were. So of those 11 positions, 5 of them are in the business services group, which supports the priority of enhancing support functions. 3 are in environmental compliance to support permit compliance and the FOG program. I'm sorry, I don't know the acronym, Ken. Do you?
That's oils and greases.
All right. 3 are in operations and maintenance to support the treatment and pumping priority by creating a pool of operators in training to help navigate the high turnover. Since the requested budget was submitted, BES is in the process of repurposing 9 vacant positions to support the treatment and pumping priority. They expect those positions to be reflected in the adopted budget. So that will be an additional change in the next round. The work no longer being done as a result of the vacant positions being repurposed is important and valued, but given the financial constraints, their focus is on the most critical missions of the Bureau. Anything to add to that, Ken, since?
No, I think I was pretty much going to, I crafted that this morning, so I was pretty much going to read it as well, but no, I mean, I'd be happy to kind of read through these if
yeah, if you want to cover the next 2 questions, they had to do with performance measures and some of the issues. So if you can cover those,
sure. Yeah, the watershed health index performance metric was 5.5 and the target is 8. And the question was what investment would be necessary to get to 8, and I think maybe clarify the long-term plan timeline to reach the strategic target. The response is really the strategic target for our that watershed health goal is really a long-term target. In order to reach the target requires all the city bureaus working together through planning, zoning, code, procurement, and infrastructure elements to stop causing harm and actively improve conditions. And what was it? A natural resource and climate resiliency bureau entity is obviously one way of focusing on this problem, but it is more than trees, just trees. So that was the general response to that question. I'm not sure I can speak intelligibly to the details, but I would be happy to try if there's any additional questions on that. The next question was the number of green streets inspected. The fiscal 24-25 goal is 28. The goal falls short of the target of 5,500. So the current metric is 2,800 green streets inspected. The goal is 5,500, and the question was, what investment would it take to get to 5,500? And really, to achieve the goal, Green Street, the goal of Green Street projections, again, it's kind of a proxy for our level of service. We would need to bring the work fully in-house and save and have about 5 crews, which are 4 FTE per crew. Currently, we have 1 in-house crew, and the rest of the work is contracted, and I would say is underfunded as well. I think there's some efficiencies as well. We believe we can improve the number of green streets inspected with the allocated PSEF dollars. So I think that's an opportunity for growth. The allocated PSEF dollars are going to add more contract FTE, which is less efficient, but that was the approach we took for this initial go around. I see Bob has a question. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Ken, I appreciate you trying to answer these questions on the fly, but I'm just going to make a general statement, which I find this completely unacceptable. The pub was created specifically to make sure that we could take deep dives on the budget. When the pub was created, we used to have budget task forces that started meeting in the fall. They met 6 to 8 times. We went over every single section of the budget in deep detail. And the pub was created to take that to another level, to keep people on year round so we could dig down throughout the year and really have advance notice on these things. What we're getting here, and it's not your fault, Ken, at all, but what we're getting here is a de facto done deal, a completed budget that we're seeing for the very first time with no discussion about these decision items. The old budget bureaus, task forces used to get dozens of pages of decision items that we worked through and talked about, whether it was staffing hires, position reductions, new programs, how things were funded, rates, and all that kind of stuff. And now we're kind of expected to go through a 290-page document that we have no explanation of, and a lot of it's relatively impenetrable. We don't have a single financial person on the pub anymore. It used to be completely dominated by financial people. Now there isn't a single person on here that I know of with financial expertise. Maybe I'm missing somebody. And we're supposed to come in with questions, and we get kind of these 1,000 level, well, we made a decision, here it is. That's not what we're here for. And I just want to be on record, because I think this is a joke, honestly. This is the ultimate rubber stamping of a budget. There's not even an effort any longer to make sure this committee is informed, and yet we are supposed to bring a high level of oversight to it. So again, it's not your fault, Ken, but I just want to be on record, because I have a bunch of questions. I did read the entire budget, and I have a ton of questions, but to put them to you here and kind of get quick answers like, oh, we just decided this, is an oversight. It's basically a public information forum where we ask questions, you give answers, and we go home. So very, very, very unhappy with where we're at. I think the pub has been completely marginalized as an effective unit for budget oversight at this point. That was a lot to throw at you, but I just want to be on record, because this isn't oversight. This is something different than that. And that was our primary function. If you go back to the enabling documents in 2015, the entire purpose of the pub was to track budget decisions year-round, proactively, on an ongoing basis, with a cadre of people that were in place over the long term, so they would have a deep knowledge of the budget.
Yeah,
that was the purpose of the committee we are now serving on.
Yeah, I've I don't know that I have a really canned response or anything for you, Bob, but I don't disagree with you. Let's put it that way. I think one of the challenges we've faced is we've provided the level of detail that pub has wanted, and that was too much for pub to process. And then then we've provided not enough now. So we're trying to find that right balance as to what is the appropriate level. This budget process was very, very compressed, more than any I've ever experienced time wise. And again, that's not fair to pub. I totally get that. It was just a situation that was bestowed upon us. Let's put it that way. But I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. There's value in seeking pub's input. I mean, my perspective is I would like pub's input throughout the entire year, not just at the budget process. And I think that's where I think there's value, and trying to stuff it into just a few meetings right before the budget it hasn't been working very well in the past. That's my perspective. So it may or may not agree with my my director or my boss.
Well, I'll go off my
This-
soapbox. I do have a real question for you.
Can I just add to the end of that, because I think Ken responded for himself, but I do want to, just for the record as well, reiterate that it has been a challenge to figure out how to address budget, and the process has changed year to year in response to feedback from pub members. So former pub members have shifted because there was a desire to spend less time talking about specific budget details and instead focus on higher level policy issues. So that was a conscious decision made at some point. That, as I mentioned the last time that you mentioned this, that doesn't mean that that is the future or was right for this year. The current makeup of the board is different. So we need to revisit those conversations and figure out how to do things differently moving forward. That's some of what we were trying to do this year.
That's not our charge though. And I think we got to go back at some point. I hope we can put it up on the screen at some point, is to look at what the charge of the pub is, because it's not for the pub to change its mission either. And the charge is very, very specific in terms of what we're supposed to be doing. So I think at some point we need to take a look at that and think hard about whether we're meeting our responsibilities, whether we're recruiting for it. I remember when I was recruited, I don't think I was asked a single budgetary question. I think I was asked exclusively about equity, pretty much. That was kind of the interest level that was focused on. And as a result, I don't think we are able any longer to provide the kind of oversight that we're supposed to be doing. So appreciate the response, but it's not necessarily for the pub to change its mission either.
Thank you, Bob, for bringing up those concerns. Looks like Karen has their hand raised. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Karen Williams, voting member. I had a comment prepped, and I'm halting a little bit because I have a response to what Bob said, but I'm going to hold that for a moment. Just to stay on the train of a comment that I have about the budget. And then anyway, I think I'd like to do that first. And that is the absence of the program offer narratives. I found not quite debilitating, but certainly limited my ability to understand connections in the budget. And I say that as a comment. I mean, I don't think they're not there. And I'm guessing at this point, we're not going to get any narratives with the program offers. But I did want to register that as a comment, that I, in the past, have found those helpful as that sort of intermediate, maybe not in the weeds information about budget, but at least providing some context for position reallocations, changes in funding, dedicated to this program, and connections to larger strategic documents, the strategic plans, equity plans, resilience, emergency preparedness and resilience type planning. So Yes. So I found program offer narratives in the past to be helpful, and I missed them in this in this fiscal year 24-25 budget documentation. And I guess I would like to also just say on the record that I am a strong proponent for broadening for the pub, whether it may or may not be changing our mission or our charge. But I do believe we should be open-minded about what what acting equitably entails. And I think that entails transparency around and making, budgetary information accessible and understandable, and, taking the time to again, explain context around budgetary decisions, ideally indeed before those decisions are made, for sure. So I just wanted to, I guess, say that on the record as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Let's go to Lorraine and then back to Bob.
Thank you, Robin. I just wanted to acknowledge what Bob says about being involved in the process. And I believe we had extensive conversation about this last budget session, where we said that we wanted the pub to be involved sooner rather than later in the process, right? And also to acknowledge all that has been going on with change in government structure and all that thing. It's not an excuse. It's what it is. And the other thing I want to say is that equity and having someone with expertise in budget is not mutually exclusive, Bob. And I just wanted to let you know how that landed. It almost landed like it came across to me that equity, when you talk about equity, it means that we are lowering the standards. It goes to that affirmative action candidate, right? When someone shows up who is diverse or whatever, it's like, oh, they compromise something to bring in the diverse candidate. So as Karen rightly said, equity is and part of a budgeting session. And if the budget is not understandable, or if the budgeting process is not explainable, and I'll use my Catholic term, to the least of the apostles, then that's the problem. And it's not the public that needs to be blamed because it can't understand the budget. It's the government that needs to be held accountable for not providing the information so the community can understand what is going on. And that results in things being done in back offices and dark rooms and smoke and whatever rooms where they sit and plans are made. So I just wanted to put that up, Bob, so that you'll understand how things land depending on what you see.
Oop, Bob, you're mute. You're muted right now.
Sorry, trying to mute here. So I apologize for that, Lorraine. That was not my intent. I was, for a long time, I was the only non-financial business person on the budget committees when they existed. So I was one of the ones that pushed for getting folks that weren't business people on the committee. So I apologize, and I appreciate where you're coming from on that. I did not mean to suggest that equity or environment or any of the other interests that are represented on the pub are mutually exclusive of economic expertise. But I think what I was trying to get at is I think we've eliminated folks who actually have deep expertise on utility budgets, which I've actually found very helpful. Like the Citizens Utility Board used to participate, and folks like that too. So there was it was skewed the wrong, I think, too heavily toward business originally. I think we've skewed too heavily toward folks that including myself, who don't necessarily have a deep understanding of municipal budgets either. And I think it was helpful to have some of those experts here. That's all I was trying to get at there. I do have a question, a specific question for you, Ken, that one of the things, really the one big cut that is proposed in this budget for BES is watersheds, natural systems, and restoration and biological sciences. Those are the big proposed cuts. It's not a bunch of packages that we get to choose and think about. As was mentioned earlier, that is the cut that is proposed. It is proposed for cut because in BES's analysis, these are lower priority work and ancillary to the core mission of the Bureau. So natural resources, trees, blue-green infrastructure is now lower priority work and ancillary to the core of the Bureau, and it will only get funded if you get PSEF funds. So I have a number of questions around that. Since when have these programs been secondary and ancillary? Who decided those programs were peripheral to BES's mission? When did that happen and why? Why weren't we engaged with that? Two, why are there not more decision packages? Why are you throwing up just the environmental pieces and that's it? That to me looks like internal power politics, because we know that natural resources and environmental stuff has always been kind of the weakest program within BES. It's always competed with the bigger programs. Are you going to get the pub funding? And if you don't, do we have any sort of discretion over your cutting these things, or is this a done deal? It's either you get the pub funding or they're out. That strikes me as a huge problem in this proposed budget.
Sorry, I was asking Farshad if he wanted to tackle that one, but I'd be happy to take a shot at it. I think
let me take one for the team, Ken, because you've when I joined, you were in the middle of your previous response. So Bob, hi. For the record, Farshad Aladadi, Business Services Group Manager at BES, and I appreciate the question. I'll just say I don't think it's as simple as it was framed. The circumstances that we're finding ourselves in is not one of politics, I think, as you framed it. It's one of risk analysis, and the resource constraints that we're trying to operate in forced us to focus on what has been determined was risks of failure of investment in some of our portfolio areas, particularly treatment and pumping, had the greatest negative consequences, and demanded to have the investment this year because we could only spend $1 once. We felt it was necessary based on our risk evaluations to fund those investments. Watershed health is core and will continue to be core to the Bureau. That hasn't changed, but I think it's really important for us to zoom out. The budget is not the Bureau's financial plan. The budget is the implementation of a slice of the financial plan in any given year, and is our attempt to balance the resources that we have available with the highest risks that need to be funded. And so, like I said, I think it's a little bit more complicated than we're deprioritizing watershed, which is not the case. It's just that the immediate investments, given the condition of our assets, and the consequences of failure of those assets, are much more far-reaching in our assessment than and couldn't be avoided.
Bob, did you have a response to that or another question?
I'm dominating the meeting, so I'll just be very brief here. I don't accept that, for sure. I really don't. I've heard that every year. I was on your budget committee. I was on your budget committee for over a decade. Every year, BES tried to cut natural resources, and every year they found funding elsewhere. You're adding a ton of positions in a variety of programs. I do not believe that and you come right out and say it in here, whether you meant it or not, you say it. These are, quote, lower priority work ancillary to the core mission of the Bureau. That's what BES wrote in its budget. And you're walking that back now. But in fact, that is how it's been treated historically. And I do believe in a budget of this size, you can find funding for these things. And I think it's a mistake to say that these are absolutely, that only natural resources, everything else is a higher priority and gut those programs, because that's what this does. $15.7 million is a big, big portion of the natural resource budget. So it doesn't feel like it's distributed in a way that's reasonable. It doesn't feel like it's well justified. You have the language in there that says it's not your core. And I think that needs to be revisited and discussed in a much, much deeper way. And I think you could find the funding. But my question for you is, do you have the PSEF funds at this point or not? I mean, is this a moot issue because you're getting the funds, or are you likely to lose these programs?
We believe that we have the funds, though I don't think the vote has happened to make that official. We are operating as if those funds are part of the budget. We haven't been told otherwise, but I think just procedurally, it's not official yet.
I'd love to see a lot more analysis on this. If you're going to cut those programs, I'd like to see the environmental cost, the economic costs to replacement on these things, the loss of community partners, the equity implications, all the different things that go into protecting our landscape for people and for the health of the environment. I think it's going to be a lot better documented than what's here.
Thank you for that, Bob. Let's pass it off to Heather, and then I'll follow her with a question.
Hi, thank you. It's Heather, voting member. I just wanted to echo and support a couple of things said by Karen and by Bob. Karen mentioned that having a narrative included would be really beneficial for us who are not financial professionals. And I absolutely agree. I am not a financial professional in any way whatsoever. I am an environmental scientist, so I understand a lot of what we're talking about, the programs that we're talking about, the environmental impacts. But you know, getting through this was long and difficult and tedious. And I think not having a narrative really made some barriers for me and probably others to fully understand and process what the information that we're taking in. And then I also want to echo what Bob was just speaking about. Something that I have a huge concern about just in general is the fact that the city of Portland has decided to route PSEF funds to budget shortfalls. That is not what we voted on in 2018. That's not what PSEF was approved for. You know, it was approved as a 1% retail tax. There was supposed to be administered by nonprofits and community groups led by communities of color and historically underrepresented groups to help fight the climate crisis and prepare for climate change. And although I do understand that some of these programs that this money is being routed to will also do that same thing, I don't think that it has the same effects that it originally had, and it's certainly not what the people of Portland voted for. But I also want to echo what Bob said on pages, starting on page 268, we have PSEF project number 12, and a few pages after that, PSEF project number 11, which are both projects that are crucial for equity. They're projects that are interconnected with our Indigenous populations, with traditional ecological and cultural knowledge and Indigenous first foods. And it clearly says that these programs are likely to be reduced or eliminated if they weren't getting this PSEF funding. And I just want to express my disappointment in that and remind the city of Portland that our Indigenous community members are crucially important community members, and these projects are crucial for their livelihood. And if I don't know if everybody's familiar with the term first foods, but that just refers to the culturally important foods to our Indigenous community members. So I really hope that these, you know, I know that PSEF funding is not permanent. So I really hope that the city takes a second look at these two projects.
Thank you, Heather, for that. I wanted to ask about why the cost of living increases were budgeted in contingency rather than the personnel services line item, and how much of the contingency budget is specifically for the cost of living? Is it all for the cost of living, or is there extra money in there allotted for something else?
I'll take a first cut at that. I think we have a personnel set aside that we put in contingency every year. We plan to, first of all, we don't know whether the COLA is going to be approved by city council. That's step number one. The other side of it is vacancy savings has been sufficient to cover our COLA costs for non-reps. So we've typically used the vacancy savings to support that additional cost. But we have a reserve. If we don't have vacancies, we need to pull it from somewhere. So we budgeted it in contingency and the personnel set aside.
And I apologize, I was writing down while you're writing your explanation. Did you say if contingency was all for the cost of living, or if there were other items budgeted into that contingency budget line?
The personnel contingency is just for COLA. I'd have to go back and look and see the specific dollar amounts. I don't have that right in front of me.
All right. Anyone else have questions specifically on BES? Let's go to Julia, and then we'll go to Bob.
I'm not saying that I have a question. I haven't had a chance to speak up, and I've unfortunately had to multitask a little bit during this meeting, but I do want to say from everything that I've been listening to and tracking that I completely agree with the concerns that have been raised. Just because I'm quiet doesn't mean that I don't share those opinions. I just want to just be a quick me too on everything that's been said from Bob, Karen, and all the pub members who've spoken up so far. So thank you.
Julia, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just a couple of other things to flag for you. A lot of the environmental targets have been changed or removed, so you can't compare them from year to year. We're not making the ones that are still there, as people have asked. I think it's important as we're cutting environmental programs to understand whether we're going to get even further away from those targets. We're already a long way. Are we going to decline? So I'd like to understand that. Most of the environmental positions and the environmental programs within BES were dismantled a couple of years ago. So when you look at those line items and you compare year to year, you can't see where those positions have gone. They've been reassigned, and so you have a bunch of blank dots where the year should be and the funding should be. So I'd like to see some analysis over the next several months about environmental natural resource positions and how we compare to prior years, because the way the budgets have been changed, you can't track that any longer. I wanted to flag that, as I understand it, the deputy city administrator is going to make $307,000, 432 with benefits. That seems extraordinary at a time when we're cutting programs to be paying somebody the better part of $500,000. And so I'd love to understand better the necessity of the salaries and all the positions that are going into the new infrastructure area. As was mentioned, there's really no explanation of anything in here relative to prior budgets. So I think where you're making changes, I would ask for more explanation. And the last thing, and I'm giving you a lot here, but you can read it off the tape, I suppose, later, is the environmental remediation fund is dropping from 6 million to 4 million. There's kind of an explanation there. This is super fund and things like that, but it doesn't really say why. It just kind of says where those cuts are occurring, but it doesn't give an explanation as to why that money is going down. And that's a substantial reduction as well, at a time where Superfund is actually gearing up into a much more intensive phase. And so I could keep going for a long time. There are just a lot of things in this budget that were very hard to track and very hard to understand, but which raised a lot of questions in my mind as to what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the impacts will be. Those are just a few examples.
Did you want a response to that, Bob, or was that mostly just for the record?
Well, it's partly for the record to get it into a letter and to start thinking about it, but it's kind of why I made the statement at the beginning, is because it's almost impossible with this budget to even really formulate questions other than what are you doing, in each section. And to Lorraine's comment, again, I agree with everything you said, Lorraine. When we used to get briefings, we would get briefings from each section of the bureau. So the stormwater folks would come in and so on, and they would spend 2 hours with us and walk us through their section of the budget so that we would really understand how things were evolving over time and what changes they were proposing and why and what their challenges were. And so whether you were experienced on a budget or not, you at least had that, hour, 2 hours to really walk through each section of the budget and get some depth on it, so that you were able to give feedback. And we've really dispensed with that and just been handed a document here, with less narrative than I've ever seen before in a budget. And it's the biggest transition we've ever seen in the last 20 years, with almost no explanation within it. It's actually pretty startling when we talk, when the numbers we're talking about. So I'm not looking for necessarily an answer because there are so many questions implicit in it, but it is to really put on the record that I think this is not an acceptable situation. And I plan to express that to council, that you can't ask community oversight boards to have oversight and treat them in this manner.
For that, Bob, let's go to Julia, and then I'll propose a question as well.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to say that I'm gonna uplift a little bit of what Bob just said there about what used to happen, because I think what I've been struggling with in this process is how to be solution oriented, but getting 2-hour or like full meeting presentations on different budget areas from the folks that are, because we got this explanation just a few minutes ago from staff about like, well, it was complicated. We had to make a decision, a constrained environment. And it's like, we could have had that conversation while these decisions were being made and our values could have been taken into account if we had had that 2-hour briefing and we were like, well, now that we've been brought into this space with enough knowledge to share what we think you should do, we would have been able to have, potentially some influence over that outcome. And even if we landed on the same decision, we would have done so through a collective process rather than being informed of a decision. So I like that Bob highlighted how it used to be done, because I think I like that you have that historic knowledge of how things have been done, because as a newer member, I didn't even know to be asking for that, right? Like that's the solution. So I think I just want to make sure that as we move forward, we get more specific about what we're asking for, so that we can have the tools we need to have a better process. But yeah, thank you. It's not a question, just a statement and an observation.
Thank you, Julia. Let's have Farshad make a comment, and then I'll ask my question.
Yeah, thank you. I've really appreciated everybody's sentiments expressed so far, even though elbows have been a little sharp. I accept that this is, and I hope you heard from Ken. I came in a little late, so apologies, but there is nothing about this year's budget process that has been ideal for us. And I know that what was just described as an ideal process of engagement with Pub is something that we've been working toward. We've had lots of conversations following last year's experience, which was also not satisfying many, but I think we recognized a path forward. All of that was overturned and disrupted by the extremely compressed planning window that we had to make these budget decisions within, and literally up to almost the last day before submittal, there was still pending uncertainty that was influencing what this budget decisions we had to make. So I'm not asking for you all to feel sorry for the process for us, but I just, from where I sit, I just don't think those expectations were possible this year. And it's not because we did not believe in the vision of collaboration that everybody's been speaking about this afternoon. We weren't trying to avoid that. It was just, frankly, logistically impossible to hold those meetings given the window that we had. So I just would offer that. And I also got to say this because I've been repeating this a lot internally, because I will tell you, as you could probably anticipate, there are many people within BES who are typically engaged on a deeper level in budget development that felt they've missed out and are unclear on budget decisions. There's a lot of dissatisfaction internally as well that we're managing, and the line that it's getting worn is that don't judge us, don't judge the process based on this last year. This last year, I think, is an outlier. We know that we shouldn't be doing business this way. I think we were just forced to, given the circumstances broadly in the city.
All right, thank you for that. My question is regarding employee development funds decreasing. It's specifically on page 27 of the total budget and page 9 of BES's portion. And yeah, the employee development funds went from like 134,000 down to about 90,000. And then the upcoming years, they just have a dash through them. And so I just had a question of why the significant decrease, and does the numbers that are not put for the further years imply that there's no investment development in that area, or just not charted yet?
I don't know the answer to that. I have to get back to you. I'm sorry.
If you can't specifically answer the question on why it was reduced, can you elaborate? Can you help us better understand, when there are dashes, is it just that it's not part of, you're not expecting it to be part of the upcoming budget, and thus you're not expecting to invest in it? Or is it more of, it's just an uncertainty at this point?
I think it's a combination of probably publishing issues with the document. Can you reference the page again?
Yeah, page 27 of the total document, and I believe it's page 9 of specifically your budget document. It's under the programs position. And yeah, it just says employee development actuals from 2021 to 2022, 134,000. And then the following year, actuals 2022 to 2023, it says it jumped down to 96,000. And then the revised for the 23-24 just has a dash. There's nothing requested for the 2024-2025, and there's nothing yeah, I think the final two lines are the same, actually.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you right now. I need to look at the. Yeah, I don't have a good answer. I'll need to dig it up, and I definitely will get back to you though, for sure.
Okay, and while we're on this page, before I hand off the hat to Karen, the line directly above it that says DP Community Partnerships, you'll notice that the majority of those numbers are 4 million, and then in the requested for this year, it looks like it's cut in half. Is that like, that seems like a divestment in the community partnerships? Can you elaborate specifically on what DP means and why the substantial reduction in this year's requested?
A DP refers to decision package, so that's before any decision package. My guess is that because the decision package for the natural area work is being funded by PSEF dollars, it would show up in the total budget, but not the decision package. Or it would be excluded from the no decision package amounts.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Karen Williams, voting member. I would just like to get a couple comments on the record about performance measures. One positive and one, anyway, requesting more information. So I wanted to support the performance measure of stream bank, feet of stream bank restored. And I noticed that the goal anyway, the target for fiscal year 24-25 is indeed the target, which is 12,000 feet. And that's up from last year in which the target was only 3,000 feet. So I wanted to call that out as positive and, you know, glad to see the investments are supporting reaching what's supposed to be, as I understand it, an annual target of stream bank restored. And the other performance measure that I wanted to call out was the 30% targeted of contracted funds awarded to what are so-called disadvantaged minority and women-owned businesses. And I recommend that this performance measure be separated or essentially disaggregated so that targeted funds to specifically BIPOC owned businesses is is called out as separate in and of itself. Thank you.
Robin, can I respond to your question real quick? I've found the page. I'm now looking at it. I think one of the things that you'll see in this budget document is that we've got all of our old program offers that were before the Bureau did the transition to the new financial system. We're required to show those, continue to show those for a couple years while there's actual data in that. So if it doesn't have a budget, it's likely because it's an old program offer that no longer exists. So one of those is the employee development. That was a separate program. If you look back 3 or 4 years ago, that was a separate program. It is no longer. It's now been incorporated elsewhere within the budget.
Thank you for that. Let's go to Bob, and then if we don't have any other questions on BES, it might be a good point after Bob's comments to take a 5-minute break and then come back to the Water Bureau's budget. So go ahead, Bob.
Sure. Amy, can you put back up page 27 again for a second? You just had it up. All right, that's great. So Ken, I think you kind of answered the question I've been raising, but this is why it is so difficult to analyze your budget. If you look on this page, you can see there's no budget for healthy working rivers, for treatments, for watersheds, for pollution prevention, for Portland Harbor, for science, fish, and wildlife, for sustainable stormwater. Almost every single environmental program in your budget's been zeroed out. And I can't find them anymore in your budget. I don't know what they've been renamed, but they've been renamed in ways that I can't track them. I certainly can't connect the dots. So when I look at science, fish, and wildlife, I don't know if it's gone. I don't know if it's been renamed. I don't know if it's been cut. I don't know if it's been increased. There is no way for anyone, no matter how high their expertise, to possibly track your budget. And so that's a huge problem when you hand something to us like that. What I see here and what I worry about is it's gone, or it's being cut, or it's being reassigned and reallocated. But what I see here is that you don't have an environmental budget any longer. And so what I'm looking for, I said this already, but what I'm looking for is I want to understand what has happened to all of these things and where they live, if they live at all. I also would like some information because we know that certain programs, trees and natural areas, are potentially being transferred to Portland Parks and Recreation. And And I'd love to understand better how that shows up, if that shows up in this budget. Have those changes already been made and have they been reassigned over to PPNR, or are they in limbo somewhere in between? Also, as a matter of being proactive, one thing I think you and Parshard are on the spot here. I'm disappointed that the program division heads are not all in this meeting as well. They should be here today, because a lot of the questions that we're asking really are for them. They're not for you, and they could either reassure us or not. So I am actually surprised that we don't have division heads here. They attended all of the budget meetings historically. They would be in the room for every single one of those. That may have been overkill, but this is underkill. So again, I don't expect you to answer that today, but I would like to know, I want to see some chart at some point in the relatively near future that connects the dots. Science, Fish, and Wildlife ended in 2023. It had 4.9 million, whatever was in there, or 490,000, I guess it would be. Where is that 490,000 today?
Yeah, I think I'll give you just a quick answer. If you look back at the prior year budget, which published the program offers, you'll see there's an entire list of program offers that were discontinued. There's a mapping, a description within those program offers that says this program offer went to here and here, and this was split up to here and here. So it's in there. It's just not apparently not published in this presentation, and for that I apologize. But yeah, it's a good question. It was something we knew was going to be an issue when we reorganized and created the new set of program offers for the Bureau. And so we tried to accommodate just the very issue you're highlighting by identifying it in those expired program offers.
Thank you.
All right. Any final questions specifically on the BES portion?
Well, the transfer of programs is where does that, how does that show up in this budget? The trees and the natural area things that were transferred to parks by council, is that show up in this budget somehow or not?
Go ahead, Farshad.
Yeah, I don't think those the final disposition of those programs has been determined. My understanding is that there is going to be an ongoing process that includes community engagement over the next several months that will indicate where those programs will live long term. So I know that the council action I think had it left a lot of us confused, but I think that we're still working to clarify that. So the short answer is that those programs, the final resting place for those programs in either parks or BES has not been determined yet.
But would they still be in your budget then? If they were in your budget last year, they would still be in here now? Then?
Yes.
And if they're still in there now, are they one of the ones, are they some of the programs that are now on the chopping block unless you get PSEF money? Because it looks like that's the case as well.
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't yes.
I want to connect the dots here because it's important, because BES and I supported BES and has put up a great protest. We cannot.
I know you did.
Because they don't have the resources, and now you're proposing to cut the resources for the programs that you are fighting tooth and nail to keep. That's a problem. That's something that needs a lot more explanation at bare minimum. But the idea that we are, not. Why is BES fighting to keep programs that it's also saying are a low priority for the Bureau and is threatening to cut? And I think you should keep them, but I'm having a hard time connecting the dots because it's taking a lot of energy. The committee that we're talking about at the beginning of this meeting is to deal with that. And so I think we really need to understand whether BES plans to continue funding those, should it keep those programs? And whether it's a low priority for you, in fact, or not. And I know there's some sharp elbows here, but there need to be answers for these kinds of questions, because you have folks out there testifying on your behalf in a very difficult political atmosphere on these issues that aren't aligning very, very well in this budget.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm honest in saying that I think this is a really healthy dialogue, and we anticipated, Ken and I anticipated some tough questions. I'll just say that I am going to struggle to give you a satisfying answer with what the current situation is for resolving those PSEF funded programs being up in the air. They are, I will say to you definitively that those programs are continuing as part of BES. They're in our budget and they're PSEF funded. That's the current state. What happens in the months or years to come, I think, is an open question.
All right, so with a question, and then we'll go to our 5-minute break.
Thanks, Robin. Karen Williams, voting member. And I think if it's any consolation for one more comment, I think this could apply to the Water Bureau budget as well. And again, it has to do with the using the program offer narratives to make connections between the programs and the performance measures. I really found in this budget, actually, and previous budgets as well, that the performance measures are not, I guess just to put it in plain language, there's not a good really case made, and it's not convincing that the performance measures are in any way kind of drivers of budgetary decisions. Perhaps they're not, but it would be, then why are they there? And in particular, I just wanted to call out an example that, is just really, really puzzling to me. And that would be this, the examples do come from the BES budget, but so one of the program offers is entitled Leadership. And the associated performance measures are really around affordability and the cost to different quintiles of household income. Important performance measures, but I can't understand how this program offer is driven by those performance measures, if it is. And another one that really stood out to me as kind of incomprehensible was the program offer titled Strategy. And that apparently is connected to the Watershed Health Index as well as educational programs. So, I mean, I can kind of make assumptions about why that is, but I guess, it's, I don't think I should have to. It should be spelled out so that, again, we can track the adequacy, I guess, of the budgetary decisions to at least be on track to meet those performance measures, even if they are, I get it, they're long-term targets. They're not necessarily, every single year they're met, but there still needs to be a better argument made about how the budgetary decisions are connected to the eventual attainment or progress toward the performance measures. Thank you. That's all.
All right, so with that, let's put a pin in it for the next 5 minutes, get some water, stretch, and then we'll come back and discuss the second half of the budget. Thank you all. All right, welcome everyone back. Hopefully we got our questions out for BES, and now we are joined by Cecilia from the Portland Water Bureau. So yeah, let's jump into it. Anyone have any initial questions specifically related to the Water Bureau's budget this year? I'll start. I noticed that there was a smart discount plan for the Portland Water Bureau budget, and I was wondering if this includes multifamily residents who get their water from a third party.
Just for the record, I'm Cecilia Huynh, Portland Water Bureau. I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. We have a smart discount program that we're working to implement this fall. And it's a financial assistance program that will use computer algorithm to find qualified customers that would get a discount. You mentioned something about getting water from a third party. That latter part, did I misunderstand?
Yeah, we have stated previously that we are interested in getting financial assistance out to multifamily residents who are billed like through their rent by a third party, who have previously had issues getting like bill assistance.
Yeah, so we have implemented the RAMP program, which is the regulated, I'm going to chop this up, maybe BS, my colleagues can help me there, but it is for customers that are living in multifamily units that qualify for the housing bureau's requirements for rent assistance. So that program was implemented July 1. And my understanding is that we have qualified 189 buildings. We're still looking into the data of the number of units within each of the buildings that we have qualified that are getting the discount. Perhaps we can come back and provide an update on how that program is going for us.
Yes, please do, because I think we wanted to get financial assistance to people who were not specifically qualified under the nonprofit assistance through the Housing Bureau, people who were just renting in apartments from private landlords. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, so the Smart Discount program would not reach those customers. It would just be customers that have a direct relationship with us, meaning they have an account.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Let's go to Alexis and then Karen.
Hi, everyone. Alexis Rife, voting member. I know I've been also quiet on this call and also just want to express support for a lot of what has been said by my fellow pub members around the budget process and a desire to be brought along a little bit more, also recognizing the condensed timeframe that the bureaus are operating under. But yeah, I want to make sure that that our input is meaningful and not kind of at the into a fully baked budget. And then also second, the comments around making the budgets a little bit more more easy to understand and missing the narrative sections. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the fountain items in the budget, both the Ira Kelly and the Thompson Elk. I don't think that we've heard a lot on the pub about the work done with fountains, and I have to say that under a constrained budget setting, I was surprised to see them in here, and so I was just curious if we could hear a little bit more if that's a requirement or what the kind of logic and reasoning was behind including them in this year when I know that we're facing budget challenges.
So I suspect that you're referring to the decorative fountains. So the Keller Auditorium fountain, the Elk fountain, of course, during the pandemic, it was and the riot, it was damaged, and that's still being restored. We did get in this year $1.5 million from the general fund to restore the Elk fountain, so that is happening right now. As far as the decorative fountains, the Water Bureau does own the fountains. Those were transferred to the Water Bureau back in the 80s. So we have the responsibility to maintain them and to operate them. We have an interagency with the Parks Bureau to help with the maintenance and operations of those fountains. And that is about $800,000 a year. One of the things that we had presented to council as far as an option is that if we could get general funds to support that, that would certainly help on the water fund, having to then save $800,000 for other costs that we would be allocated through the city transition costs.
Okay, that's That's helpful. And then the timing of that is just has to be this year because of it's coming from the general fund.
Well, it's not, I mean, it's something that we have requested in the past or had conversations about. We have requested that those fountains be maintained by the Parks Bureau. Of course, due to lack of general funds and lack of funding within parks to get the general fund that they need to be able to do that. You know, that didn't happen. So we continue to support that. Again, it is assets that we own in the water fund. So we are responsible to maintain and operate them. I see that I may have accidentally phoned a friend to help because I see Jeff Winter may be wanting to help with elaborating on my answer.
Yes, Cecilia, just to clarify the funding sources for the ELK, there's two components. One, general fund, which was about, let's say 1.8 million, but we also received insurance proceeds from the insurance program, which is another 600,000 or 700,000. So all total, there's $2.2 million worth of non-Water Bureau money to fund the ELK improvements. And although you don't see it in the details of this particular budget, we have reduced some of the funding in the fountain program to address, the constrained environment that we're in. But we still have projects that we're proceeding.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Karen, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Karen Williams, voting member. I have a question, Cecilia, about the status of workforce equity initiatives, and particularly last budget, we weren't able, because the fund increase that Water Bureau had asked for was not granted, the rate increase. You were not able to fill those 8 positions that were dedicated to creating opportunities for diversifying the workforce and creating, sort of career ladders for folks. And are there any workforce equity initiatives that you have been able to fund with this proposed budget? And if so, could you describe those?
So I do want to clarify that we are, continuously diversifying our workforce through our apprenticeship program. I mean, and I should say training program, because they're no longer called apprenticeship program. We do have positions that are in the field that are trainees that we bring in. Again, the goal there is to bring in a more diverse workforce, train them in the area of, water work. And then over time, a lot of those trainings in the past has progressed up the organization chain. And some of them are now managers and supervisors throughout the organization. So we found that to be very successful. What we were hoping to do is expand on that, having more trainees or more positions that we can, expand on that work. In the current budget, what we did get is 8 new trainee positions that we have not filled because of the rate that we didn't get, and with the assumption that we will need to eliminate those positions. But we also got, on a limited term basis, 5 what we call maintenance trainee worker positions that we are actually working through the recruitment process as we speak. So we are working to recruit those. Again, that's very similar to the other. It is even yet more entry level, more exposure to sort of maintenance worker work, level type of work. So again, that's to allow folks to have some exposure to the trades and the field work. Again, providing the opportunity that we hope to be, providing to give folks at least some exposure to that work to then maybe move into the trainee programs down the road. Or apply for other, field jobs.
This is Robin. Just trying to clarify my understanding of that. Cecilia, with those 8 positions, you said that the positions were approved. Was the funding approved or not approved? And then if the funding was approved but you didn't hire anyone, was that money reallocated somewhere else?
So it's positions that have been approved, it's in our budget. It's in the budget as far as authorized position, the funding for the budget is there. Now, when we went through the rate hearing, the rate work session, what we were given was a rate that was lower than what we were proposing to support our budget, including those 8 new positions and the other positions that we have requested last year or for the current year. What we, when we were given a lower rate increase for the current year by 1%, rather than going in and quickly adjusting the positions or the budget, we were given the opportunity to keep the budget the same, understanding that we're going to get lower funding, and we were going to manage that through vacancy savings or holding some of our expenses, knowing that in this budget that we're now working on, 24-25, that we would need to be reducing our budget to account for that. So, we started this fiscal year knowing that we would need to be cutting $2 million, and we immediately put a bunch of vacant positions on hold, including some of the new positions that we got. And again, we do have positions on hold in anticipation of needing to absorb the city transition costs that will be allocated to us. We have, at this point, for the requested budget, have not reduced any positions. So those 8 positions are still in our budget. We are going to be making the final decisions on the positions that we will cut based on the total, cost that will be allocated to us based on the mayor's proposed budget. We have made other cuts and reductions.
Thank you for that. Anyone have another question? I see Alexis, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a little and dive in a little bit here more, Cecilia, because in the equity, in the Public Works equity statement, it does say that water may eliminate 15 to 18 vacant positions, which include positions in the water worker trainee program. So if I'm hearing you correctly, of those 15 to 18 vacant positions, 8 of those are from the trainee.
Yes. That's correct.
Program, and then 10 other positions have the possibility of being eliminated depending on kind of city transition costs.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
This is Robin Castro. When I was looking at the beginning of the Water Bureau's budget, it was saying that retail customers use 60% of the water sold, but offer 90% of the revenue, and that wholesale customers, such as other cities, special districts, private water companies, use 40% of our water, but only produce 10% of our revenue. Is there any internal push to increase the revenue that we get from wholesale customers to benefit retail customers, essentially making it less of a 9-to-1 when it comes to in the revenue stream?
So just very high level as far as how we set wholesale rates, which results in only 10% of the revenue that we're collecting overall for water sales. There are we have wholesale agreements that are very specific as far as how we would establish those wholesale rates. For the most part, the rates only include the cost of operating and the return of the facilities that are used to serve these wholesale customers. So if you think about everything that is in town, so the hydrants, the mains, all that work, the wholesale customers do not pay for because it doesn't benefit them in any way, right? They're not using our hydrants, they're not using the mains in front of our house or the services. So the cost of those are all only being paid for by retail customers. All the other costs in the watershed, supplying the water, there is a component of, of course, the compliance that we have to do, monitoring the water. All of those are allocated to both retail and wholesale customers because both share in the benefit. So when you start looking at only allocating the facilities in the O&M costs that are used to serve the wholesale customers and retail, and then spreading it among, again, retail and wholesale, it just comes down to, only 10% roughly of the revenue that we collect from wholesale customers. So to answer your question, as far as making that something other than, 1 to 10 or 1 to 9, it's looking at maybe increasing the wholesale customer base, meaning finding other wholesale customers that would be interested in buying Portland Water from us.
Thank you for that. Anyone else with a question? Back to me, I have a question. On page 73 of the budget under performance, it says the number of assistance programs events. It went from 12 a year to 17, and then it's proposed 10 for this budget. Why the decrease in assistance program events?
It's I might need to find that performance measure. Are we referring to assistance program or assistance program events that we put out?
Give me just a second to find it in the budget myself. But yeah, I have it written under around page 73 for performance. So let me see if I can find it. Beautiful. Yep, I have it on a slightly different page. So, but yeah, I just noticed that we successfully got up to 17, and it looked like we were at least managing maybe 1 per month or equal to that. And I was wondering, is it efficient? We're just getting more efficient at it so that we don't need to be having in-person events, or is this just a specific reduction in those events?
I'm gonna have to go back and inquire about that and get back to you, Robin. The target is 10. I don't know what the targets were for the prior years. That doesn't mean that we are limited to doing only 10. So I don't know whether it's a reduction or that's just our target on an annual basis, and we may end up doing more. So I can check in on that or follow up on that.
Okay, and I'm going to throw in one more question while we're on this page, and then I'll hand it off to Karen. Under quality, it says percentages of calls answered within 60 seconds. Is that when I call in, it takes less than 60 seconds for me to reach an operator, or is that a metric of how quickly the calls are ending?
No, it's how quickly we're getting to that call to answer within 60 seconds.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. Sure. Go ahead, Karen.
Karen Williams, voting member. Cecilia, my question is about how this budget this year takes into account the, I think probably still unusually large amount of accounts in arrears. Please correct me if that's wrong. But how does that factor into, say, revenue expectations? And is that different from how the accounts in arrears were factored into last year's budget?
So we have, I want to say 10, 20 years ago, transitioned from setting rates on a cash basis, which means we are accounting for the actual cash that we have on hands for rate setting. So while we do anticipate to collect on our accounts receivable balance, it's not something that we are banking to get that money for rate setting. You know, accounts receivable has been coming down since we have resumed debt recovery. And of course, our rates have been increasing over the last few years. So one of the things that I have not had a chance to go back and look at is adjusting for the rate increase that we've had. What is actually the additional amount of accounts receivable above where we had been prior to the pandemic? You know, that was been a measure that we've been looking at since the pandemic. But obviously with the rate change, the amount of accounts receivable that would consider be standard would be, you know, increasing on an annual basis because of the rate change. But again, I think to answer your question, you know, the amount of accounts receivable is not a factor in the budget that we are putting together.
Okay, thanks.
I'll throw my hand in the ring again. On page 74 of the budget, specifically talking about resources, internal, external resources. As someone who doesn't have a financial background and has really navigated this budget actively just as a member of PUB, I noticed we have some numbers that are like either cut in half or substantially doubling. And so just at the top of the page under external resources, it says intergovernmental. It goes from like 3 million to 1 million to 500,000. I was wondering, why are we seeing such decreases in that area? And then something similar, which is just a few lines down under internal revenue. The first bar, it says funds transfer. We go from funds transfer revenue goes from like 220 million and then revised most recently to 400 million, and then it's requested up to 600 million. And that's a tripling. And so I was wondering, what can explain these drastic reductions or increases in the budget over these last couple of years? Cecilia, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, let me start again with the answer. I'm going to start with the first set of numbers that you pointed out, Robin, intergovernmental. The actuals for fiscal year 21-22 was the 3.3 million. Actuals for 22-23 was 1.3. I think that's the line you were pointing out. And then the budget is about 700,000. So, you know, one of the things that we do following CD's financial policy is to be conservative in our estimating of the revenue. So the budget is conservative to assume 700 million coming in, and our actuals has been more in those cases. And the intergovernmental revenue there includes the work that we are charging for a couple of our wholesale customers for the maintenance of the Washington County supply line. So the actuals is really hard to predict as far as the actual maintenance that is needed on that line. So the actual generally does exceed the revenue for that reason. Again, to be conservative, we don't want to overestimate the revenue, not knowing, you know, what the reimbursement might be. So that's the answer to that one. The other question that you had on internal revenues is funds transfer on revenues. So the Water Bureau has 3 funds. And I think this is the operating fund. The operating fund is where we expend all of our dollars. And so when we expend dollars on our capital work, it is being reimbursed by our construction fund that manages all of the capital expenses. So that's what part of this revenue that's coming back into the operating fund is internal, is within our own funds, water funds, I should say. So the construction fund, in this case, is one of the other funds that does the reimbursement to the operating fund. So this is capital work that we have expended and it's being reimbursed. And so what you're seeing here is really a change in the capital work that we are planning. And if you look at our capital program, that has been growing for the purpose of the filtration project that is underway. So 600 million, a large part of that is for the capital program reimbursement. That's coming back into the operating fund.
And just quick question, comment and then question. Throughout the budget process, the mayor, city council, the bureaus have mentioned that construction costs are increasing and it's becoming a problem. Is that the line? Are we making commentary that these costs are increasing, but also benefiting from the cost increases?
I'm sorry, in what way are we benefiting from the cost increase?
I'm trying to, so if I'm understanding that budget line, specifically, you had said the construction fund, I think. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if increased costs in construction have increased revenue for the Bureau at the same time as the city is making comments that construction costs are negatively impacting us, and thus they're using it as a reason to limit like rates.
So again, that line, as far as the internal revenue transfer, is a purely a reimbursement. So there's no additional revenue coming in as a benefit for increase in construction costs. So as we're expending on our projects, we are having to pay more because costs are going up for construction, and it is a reimbursement to the operating fund. So I think the comment is construction costs in general has been rising above inflation. For all of the infrastructure bureaus that has to do capital investment, we're seeing that increase, and it is impacting our capital program.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, given all of that, with the new treatment plant and all of that, how's that affecting your long-term perspective? I mean, the treatment plant's been going up and up and up, and but I don't see much in this budget that really clearly articulates kind of how all of this is going to manifest itself over the long run, with rates and other sort of intersecting pieces of the puzzle. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your long-term perspective is. Are you feel like you're on a stable trajectory, or are we going to continue to hit more and more challenges as we go forward?
So that is something that I, of course, rely heavily on our engineering group to help with doing their best in estimating project cost. We have updated our capital program to reflect the cost as we understand it now for the filtration plant. That was a conversation that we had with council last summer related to the increase to that program. That is reflected in our capital program. As a result, we did have to reduce and defer some of the work that was there in the capital program to absorb the additional cost. This is when is Jeff still on? I'm going to phone my friend again, Jeff, who manages the capital plan. I think, we do our best in projecting what the project costs are until the GMP, guarantee maximum price, comes in, and then we adjust our projects accordingly, and rebalance. This is the constant rebalancing of the budget within the CIP as cost either goes up or down. Anything you want to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, specifically, we have been resequencing some of the bigger programmatic items. The one that most specifically is impacted is the seismic resiliency plan improvements. We kind of shifted those out. We're also doing a replanning of that to make sure the costs, it's been almost decades since we did that plan. So we're confirming the costs, and we're going to resequence the schedule of those projects. The Oregon resiliency standards require compliance over a 50-year period. So we've been kind of holding a 30-year implementation plan up until now. So now we're more like 40 years before we'll implement all the improvements that were in the plan. So there was probably 300 million total in the 10-year plan. Now, we only publish 5 years, so you don't see everything that's going on behind the scenes. But we shifted probably close to 200 million into outer years in order to keep the rates in the overall CIP consistent.
I guess that's a piece that I hope we can understand better in the near future, is how we're shifting risk, because there's a lot of pressure to hold rates down. We're coming into these mammoth expenses with water. We knew the plant was coming. With BES, we're just starting to absorb that. I don't think what I get from these budgets is a good sense of the trade-offs about short and long-term risk, short and long-term debt, what holding the rates down now might do to future generations. And that's material that was historically in the budget. I think there was much more analysis so that a body like this could actually weigh in and push council and say, we don't necessarily agree with the way you're making these trade-offs, that we're holding back now, but it's going to cost us a lot more later. And I think more information along those lines, so that we can make more informed recommendations, would be very helpful.
Yes, this logistically, the sequencing of the budget and the CIP is shifted a little bit. Last year was the first year we did it where we actually did not provide the narrative for the capital improvement plan with the requested budget. They've deferred that to the adopted. Now, I'll be self-serving. I think that's a better idea, because as we go through the city's process, they can change the budget, right? Then there's a mad scramble to fix the rates, and all the details, as well as get the narrative done. So, and the narrative will hopefully comport a little better with what the adopted budget is. We certainly had that last year, where there was a last minute change, as you're aware of. So so I guess I realize it's probably not ideal from your perspective, Bob, but hopefully we'll address some of that in the narrative for the adopted version.
Well, so Jeff, you're right. It's not ideal. So I guess I'm looking to you for advice, or Cecilia, as to how a body like this would make an informed recommendation if we don't have that information. How do we weigh in and sort of balance the competing interests that are at play here without that information, or are we just flying blind? I mean, because it feels to me like we're just flying blind. In which case, this is a fairly performative exercise.
I agree with you, Bob. I think my colleagues in BES has mentioned that I think it's a process. This is a process that we would like to work with PUB on, as far as improving the information that PUB would like, and the level of information you like, and what are the areas of that PUB would like to weigh in. Historically, we went through a phase where we provided a lot of the historical information, how rates are set, what impacts rates. And then we went through a phase where the PUB says, no more, please. This is more detailed than I want to know. I want to be more on the policy end. So we shifted to that. And then, of course, with the budget process that we, went through, I think we're all managing the unknowns. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, for PUB to be making the level of, recommendation or opinions on what you're talking about would require more education on, what's the long-term debt that we're looking at? What's the forecast beyond 5 years? Is it, is it expected to go down or up? I mean, who's going to end up picking up the bills at some point, right? Those are, conversations that is, many months, many conversations. It isn't a conversation we can have in January. That would be more information than one can absorb and be able to even make any heads and tails out of that. And I would agree with Ken that, our preference would be to be having budget conversations year round with PUB. Again, that is certainly something that we would like to work with PUB on. maybe that's a conversation that we can start as soon as we get through this year's process.
I appreciate that. You know, I do think it's a mistake to separate out budgets from policy, because I think ultimately budgets are where the policy actually gets implemented. And so I think it's a disconnect that I've seen in this process over and over now, where Pub is very good at sort of saying we care a lot about these things, these bullet points, but we're not connecting that or marrying that to actually budget lines that tell us whether we're doing it. And we're not really connecting it to the metrics that are in the budgets that, you know, because ideally we would say something like, we care about equity, it manifests itself in these ways. These are what we would be looking for in terms of equity. Here are the metrics that we're measuring. Are we getting closer to them or further from them? And how will this budget actually affect those things? But right now, you know, if we just stay high on policy and low on detail, then we're kind of shouting into the void, right?
All right, so with that, thank you, Bob. I saw a lot of head nods in agreement. I'm gonna ask everyone to stay an extra 5 minutes specifically. We'll need to decide, do we have enough to ask for invited testimony tomorrow at the rate hearing? Or are we better off sending our critiques of the budget process specifically to the bureaus? That way we can be engaging at that high level that Bob was talking about, that we were created for. We were supposed to be engaging in those 20-year plans. We're supposed to be having those year-round budget meetings. And yeah, please come on to the, just unmute yourself if you have any ideas on if we should speak at the rate hearing tomorrow, or if we should at least just listen in on it to see what they're saying. Go ahead, Karen.
I have a question first, and that is, when is the next opportunity? I'm not, yeah, I'm more familiar with us basically just having one shot. Like, there is just one rate hearing, but is there another opportunity to provide oral testimony?
So there is not before the next phase in the budget. So the next phase in the budget is the mayor's proposed. So to provide feedback before the mayor makes any proposal, we would do that likely in writing or directly to the mayor. And that, you know, would be sometime over the next month, because those, I have to look back at the calendar, but usually are early in April. And so the rate hearing is earlier this year, although it's just specific to the rate, not, you know, the full budget decisions. So you have the opportunity for verbal testimony at the rate hearing. We'd have to ask to be invited, but a Commissioner Maps would support that if there was desire for that. And then written, or you could request an actual meeting with the mayor's office. That has happened in prior years, where the mayor meets directly with a couple pub members before the proposed. It hasn't happened in several years. And then it goes through the next phases, the approved and the adopted. So when council hears the budget for the approved, there is both a hearing where people can provide testimony. So you're not invited testimony, it's the full budget is being heard. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Yeah, thanks.
I think I'm a big fan of taking advantage of every opportunity we have to get our opinion in. I think for the rate hearing, we should testify. I think we should say that if nothing else, right now, we don't have enough information to really evaluate the impacts of this rate. The way the budget was done does not provide enough information to actually have a coherent opinion about the trade-offs that are implicit in this. and that is a problem. And we can't offer a solution right now because of the timing of the budget cycle, but I think it's important that they hear that. And I think it's important as the Budget Oversight Committee that we say that to them. I think we should request a meeting with the mayor. We can figure out what goes into it later, but I think it's a way of starting to exercise our role. And then we can save our most detailed comments for the mayor's recommended budget. But I think there's real value to establishing a presence at each step along the way, even if what we can say is limited.
How is that sitting with everyone?
I agree for sure.
Yeah, I would, this is Karen Williams, voting member. I would also be in favor of something along the lines of not being able to make a specific recommendation pro or con on the rate increases for lack of information. And I say that with some I don't know, fear, let's just say it, I guess, because I recall us doing that before, and it's, honestly, it's doing that before and not saying that we explicitly support the rate increase, and then having programs that we did support essentially sacrificed because we didn't explicitly support a rate increase. So I totally agree. I mean, I certainly don't have enough information at this point. We had a lot of questions today to be able to explicitly say, yeah, 5.51 for 5.15% and 1%, I guess, that, yeah, in favor and support the programs that's going to be directed to. So, yeah, I mean, I think the best we can, I agree, we shouldn't pass up an opportunity. I think we should say something and try and gather more information so we can make an explicit recommendation, before it's moot.
Do folks have an opinion about requesting that meeting with the mayor?
I have an opinion, but it looks like Bob's being polite and raising his hand, so.
No, go ahead, Karen.
No, I don't, yeah, I have an opinion and I don't necessarily think it's productive to share my opinion, but I certainly wouldn't object to requesting a meeting. I guess I might want to just recommend that we perhaps strategize a bit with Commissioner Mapp's office, so we go into that meeting able to make a difference and influence, but yeah.
And whether or not we do make a difference or influence, it's like we can only send so many strongly worded letters and, testify in public meetings with a lack of enough information to, you know what I mean? It feels, yeah, I mean, I think Bob has spoken to this before, where a lot of what we do is starting to feel rather futile, but like, it feels like instead of doing the same things over and over again, we can try something new. But I agree, we will need to prepare, but I have a similar feeling.
All right, so let's go to Lorraine, Bob, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thanks. Did we ever get any information? I think it was one of our meetings some time ago about the difference in what was recommended, the rate increase that was recommended, and what is actually proposed today, and how that is Oh, okay, unmuted. Did we ever get that information? Or because I don't recall us ever getting that information about with all the rate studies and all those different things, and we had to ask for some information to say, okay, this is all the studies that were done, and this is what was recommended, as opposed to what is now being proposed. I was just curious.
We do have information from last year's what was requested versus what council decided to fund, because they funded a rate that was lower than what was requested. So that's some of what Karen was referencing last year when council was asking, does pub support the rates that were requested, and pub didn't have a response at that point in time, didn't have a clear recommendation. And ultimately those rates were at a lower rate than what was part of their financial plan. And I can provide you the specific numbers on that.
Go ahead, Bob.
I would propose that we testify tomorrow. We keep it relatively short and simple. We just say a few things. One, a little bit of a critique of the process, understanding that this was a unique year, but nonetheless, we're simply not getting enough information in a timely manner to really understand the implications, and that does a disservice to the city and to the pub and to the bureaus. Number two, that we are concerned about cuts, and that when cuts are made, it's often the environmental and the environmental justice programs. So while we're not making a recommendation tomorrow, we are not certainly endorsing going lower than what is recommended. That we want to make sure that those programs are not on the chopping block, and some already are. And that going forward, number three, going forward, it's going to be critical as the city transitions that we really do make sure that whatever oversight boards are carried over or recreated really do get integrated into these processes in a much more foundational way, so that we really can have more substantive input and the community really is better involved. And I think if we make those 3 points, we protect ourselves against we kind of head off the cut.
Yeah, this is Robin. I just want to say that I agree with how Bob kind of laid that out, and that I thought it was important. Karen's critiques about not having the narratives along with this, and the idea that they were going to be included in the adopted budget but not the proposed, is really hindering our ability. And so I thought that that was an important thing to specifically touch on. So with that, the people that have chatted, it sounds like there is a general interest in this, and not to volunteer Bob, but I believe, Bob, you had said that you might be available to actually testify at the testimony tomorrow. Is that still true?
That is still true, yes.
Okay. So then with that, Amy, other than just what was said today, do you need anyone to assist you with finalizing that testimony between today and tomorrow?
I can coordinate with Bob. I mean, I think you captured it pretty succinctly in the end of the meeting here. It would also be helpful to coordinate, or at least let the Commissioner Map staff know what the testimony will be, just so that there can be some response or coordination with them. Jack has offered their services as support as well, if you want to bounce any ideas off of them. But I can let them know generally what was summarized today and help Bob craft what is needed for testimony if he's going to be testifying. It would be great to just formally vote, make a motion and vote as a board to delegate that to Bob, though.
All right, this is Robin Castro, and I am making a motion to delegate the task of writing the testimony as well as providing the testimony from Pub to the rate hearing tomorrow. I think that included everything.
I
And I would just-
second that motion.
And just a friendly amendment, I would say those 4 points, I would wrap in Karen's point as well. About the lack of narratives. I think that's, so the 3 points I raised and that fourth, and that would basically be it. We keep it short and sweet.
All right, so with the limited amount of time, we'll have Bob the discussion part. And then let's do maybe a vote of affirmation just by like everyone saying aye or
Public comment first.
Ooh, let's not skip public comment. Are any members of the public here that would like to say anything? All right, not hearing
I
anything.
am public and I am fine,
Oh,
so,
go ahead.
and I'm not certain who else is here. Sorry, I was trying to get to my mute button.
Thank you, Carol. All right, so Robin, I think it probably is a good idea to just do general affirmation. So if people want to give thumbs up or if you have concerns.
Yes, do a thumbs up. We got 4, 5.
All right, I got it.
6. Beautiful. All right, so we will be testifying tomorrow. Thank you to Amy and Bob for writing that, and thank you everyone today for the questions and for just for everything. I love being on this board with all of you. And so I think the only thing left with that is just, hey, there is an ARC meeting. The March one was canceled. The April 9th one is still open from 9 to noon. So if you have the time, please email Amy. And Amy, did you have any comment on staff recruitment?
No, just that I did get the go-ahead from my director to recruit for the coordinator position that supports Pub. So I just wanted to give a heads up that that would be coming and that I'll be sending you some information because, of course, I want to coordinate and make sure that you're engaged in that process and that we're meeting Pub's needs. So I will send some written communication and then on the other front, the recruitment of members, there you'll see another announcement go out because it is a public meeting, but the recruitment subcommittee will be meeting next week to determine interviews. And other than that, I think we'll talk about next agenda moving forward.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all for staying with us extra long today. And yeah, we have an upcoming meeting on the 21st at 11 a.m. So we will see you then.